Talk is a short talk. This is The Windy Domain, a challenging real-world application of integrated planning and scheduling by David Pattison, Wenbin Ji and Francis Quayle. And David is presenting.
Okay, as it's a short talk, I'm not going to waste any time. We're just going to get right into it. This is some work I did with Wenbin Ji and Francis Quayle, a very short project we did in order to try and see how quickly can planning be deployed in a real-world scenario. And the scenario we're talking about is offshore wind turbines. People love wind turbines, don't they? It's politics and religion and wind turbines are the great things that divide societies. But we're looking at how maintenance is performed in our day-to-day jobs and how you monitor wind turbines for repairs. And we saw this, and I saw this and said, that's a planning problem, repairing, getting plans for wind turbines, particularly in an offshore context. So we thought, well, let's give it a quick try. Let's throw something together and see how quickly can we deploy some off-the-shelf technologies to this problem. So some background, the EU have a 20% target for 2020 for renewable energy, and most of that is going to come from wind energy because all others are either too localised or too immature at the moment. And there's going to be a move which is starting about now, the past couple of years, to push all of this offshore. And the greatest obstacle to this deployment of offshore energy is the maintenance aspect. It's the fact that these turbines are meant to last 20 years. That's what the IEC standards say. But in reality, no gearbox has ever lasted more than 7. So these things require a lot of playing about with. As things break, it is actually quite an immature technology. It's far more mature than it was 10, 20 years ago, but it's still relatively new. So in terms of maintenance, onshore maintenance is trivial. It's trivial to perform and it's trivial to schedule for because it's very easy to get access to the site. You'll have a nice gravel track. You've got cranes which are readily available. You've got engineers you can call up from the next town over. They'll be there by lunchtime. Wonderful. Everyone loves it. You can do the plans by hand. You don't need any automation. You've got a guy in an office. He does it all for you. Offshore is a different kettle of fish entirely. It can take you days just to get to these sites. Now, we're talking about round 3 sites being ready about 2020, I suppose. These things are about 150, 200 miles off the coast. So just getting there is going to take a couple of days. And the equipment itself is very scarce and it's very in demand. There are about 12 ships that serve the UK and the North Sea coast area. And those 12 ships are the only ones that can do any form of major maintenance on turbines, blade replacements, gearbox replacements. Without that ship, your turbine is kaput. It's not going to do anything. And they're incredibly expensive. £250,000 per day that's a lot of money. So you're going to need it when you need it, and you're going to have to make good use of it when you have got it. Also, when you're moving offshore, the maintenance windows are very, very short. You'll never get a jack-up barge out in the North Sea in December. There's no way you could get out there and perform maintenance on it. It's too choppy, the wind speeds are too high, health and safety, you'll get nowhere near it. So all of this is done in the summer months. So just being able to get a plan which says, oh yeah, it's okay, you can do that, but sorry, the wave height's going to be too high, you can't do that for that month. By law, we have to show this photo in every single wind turbine talk you'll ever hear. If you ever hear another wind maintenance talk, I guarantee this photo will be in it. This actually happened not far from Glasgow. But it's onshore. Yeah, the turbine's basically exploding, but you could fix that in about a month. The equipment is free. It's freely available. You put that offshore, as I say, that's a really big problem. So the motivation, as I say, is at the moment all of this is done by hand. What you have is the operators of the turbine, as in the people who are doing the maintenance on it. They have a set of generic plans. for each kind of fault category, if you like. And it ranges for about 10 categories, from incredibly trivial up to more complex ones. And they're almost like lifted plans, if you like. They're very generic. So it's not a case of you seeing, we'll go out to the turbine with these 2 engineers and we'll take this equipment and we'll start the job on the Monday and we'll land, etc., etc. It just says fixed turbine 1 week. That's what it says. So it's very generic. So there's a lot of potential there for inefficiencies to be introduced. And more to the point, somebody has to take that information and then they look at it and say, okay, well, I'm going to have to phone that company and that, blah, blah, blah. So we saw this and thought we could, given that we've got contacts with real wind consultancies, we thought we can maybe approach them and say, well, we've got this idea, we could see what we can get done in a short space of time, because this isn't the main focus of the day-to-day project for our team. So we thought, well, we'll give this a crack. And the idea was, we want to take all those kind of 10 generic domains, generic repair problems, and we want to build one problem for it, one domain, which has the ability to model all of these individual things, all the way from trivial interactions like helicopter flying out, you flick the switch and you come home, and that's all that's required, but someone has to do it, all the way through to new gearbox needs required, and that's a week job. So this is a kind of typical problem. You've got multiple wind farms, you've got different conditions at each site, they're all located different distances. One of them could be in a heavy storm, heavy swell. And the kind of equipment you've got available is helicopters. The jack-up barge, that's the one that costs £250,000 a day. And the other equipment like technicians and workboats. And you want to model things all the way, as I say. So we've got this PDL 2.2 encoding. We've got 2 variants of it, Windy Simple and Complex. I won't go through all the individual things for time. They're in the paper. We've got timed initial literals in it to model day and night cycles, because you're not allowed to work at night. Now, the generic plans just say work for a week, and that includes day-night cycles. In this context, we're going to say you can only do work during the day, and you're not allowed to move about the site during the night either. And in the complex variant, we've also got required concurrency, in that that's really the only way you can model the costs associated with it in a very generic manner. You have to rent these equipment, rent the ships on a 24-hour basis, helicopters on an hourly basis. So you have to continually renew the rental agreement. The features of the domain are, it's at heart a scheduling problem, and this is what everyone refers to inside the team that I work in. But it's kind of wrapped around a planning problem. So you can move about inside sites. Imagine you basically get to the site and then you're free to move about it as quickly as you want. You can directly access any turbine. It's not worth modelling the logistics of it. So that becomes scheduling, essentially, moving that resource to that turbine at that time. But getting all that equipment there is a planning problem. And the thing you want to model is the time it takes to do the job versus the cost of actually doing the job. Because wind turbines, I don't know if you know this, they're all about money. They're not about saving the world. So we come up with a few evaluation domains for it, ranging from these incredibly trivial problems through to more complex ones. And we applied the optic planner to it. Luckily, that had the timed initial literal abstractions for it, which allowed it to say, or recognise rather, that the sun comes up at 8 o'clock and goes down at, well, no, it doesn't come up at 8 o'clock, but it's up for 14 hours a day, and that's your work window. And that abstraction allowed plans to become tractable, because otherwise it couldn't detect that. The metric in Windy Simple is just time. Just time. How long is it going to take to do this plan? The Windy Complex is too complex, unfortunately. The way in which the required concurrency is modelled is very hard for the planner to pick up on. Now, we went through several iterations of the domain to try and remove this, but in the end, we kind of settled on it because we wanted it to be a very generic thing. It's a very short project we were doing, and we wanted it to be generic a generic domain, but it appears to be out with the reaches of the current technology. So that restricts us to the temporal model. I won't bore dwelling on these results, but they're more complex domains in the tests. And it's the planning time is interesting, because at the moment, these generic plans where somebody's having to ground it out, if you like, they can take days and weeks to produce. So you've got quite a long time to plan on. You're fairly free, 10 minutes, nothing, half an hour, fine. You could even give it a couple of hours if you knew it was going to come up with a fairly decent plan. So this case, the hard problems take about half an hour. Problem is, they're really quite inefficient when they actually come out. Because you're only modelling the temporal aspect, it doesn't really say, we probably shouldn't be flying out people on a helicopter and then bringing the ship out to let them do the repairs. But it's a domain that lends itself towards optimisation and optics of forward chaining planner. But it's the only one that we're aware of that can actually handle the constraints of the domain, even in the simple variant. Some conclusions. I would certainly think that remotely located assets are going to become very much common in the future. And it's something, these things require a lot of maintenance. The sector is woefully underprepared for this in terms of automation. Okay, it's completely wide open. So what I'm telling you is there's opportunities here. Approach your friendly local OEM energy management system, and they will probably listen to you. If you can go up to them and say, hey, we've got an idea about applying planning to this, we can automate your process so when something breaks on a Friday night, we can give you a plan for it in about half an hour on how to resolve it. They will listen to you. I guarantee they will listen to you. And it's a very real-world benchmark, which I think would be useful in general evaluation of planners. And just some future work. We may continue on the road. I have a gut feeling that we can model this as a strips problem, but it would be a bespoke integration with a planner. As I say, I think we can model strips, but it would be more software engineering tied with a planner. And the question is whether or not we are going to do that, because I say it's a side project for us. There are plenty of extensions possible in terms of preferences for these things. Like it's being able to say, I would quite like that turbine to be fixed, rather than saying, I need it fixed. Because what generally happens is, if something breaks, only the high priority stuff will get fixed in that time window. The rest of it will just sit there for another few months until someone else has the ability to go out and fix it. And again, optimising. But that's all. I'll take any questions.